Some shows take time to earn your trust. Others deliver moments so bold, so breathtaking, that you know instantly you're watching something that matters. The Wheel of Time, despite its controversial changes and early cancellation, carved out a legacy of unforgettable scenes. Sequences that weren't just great television, but high fantasy at its finest. From searing personal revelations to metaphysical showdowns, from blood-soaked battlefields to the quiet courage of choice, this series gave us moments that left us breathless. And though the show was cut short, the moments it did give us remind us of what was possible, what could have been. 10. Moiraine's arrival in Emond's Field. This was the moment the ordinary world cracked open. As Rosamund Pike's Moiraine stepped into the common room of the Winespring Inn, cloaked in blue and cloaked in mystery, something shifted. Not just in the village of Emond's Field, but in the hearts of every viewer. Her presence was calm, but crackling with tension. A noblewoman, a sorceress, a storm in human form. This scene mattered because it captured the essence of the Wheel of Time, the idea that legends walk unnoticed among us, and that the smallest places hold the greatest potential. Moiraine didn't shout, she didn't dazzle with power. She observed, she measured, and then, when Trollocs descended on the village, she revealed just a glimpse of what she was truly capable of, calling fire and lightning with elegant fury, defending lives that had no idea how much they mattered. Her entrance was the gateway drug to the entire world, and even now, years after the pilot aired, fans still remember the hush that fell when she said simply, "I am Moiraine Sedai." 9. Nynaeve's rage-fueled healing. In Season 1, when Nynaeve Alamera found herself surrounded by death, blood, and fading hope, something ancient broke free inside her. Faced with Lan's mortal wound, overwhelmed by emotion she barely understood, she didn't reach for the power, she became it. The healing that followed wasn't a gentle act of restoration, it was a detonation. Light poured from her like a star reborn. She didn't just mend the wounded, she resurrected them. Every stitch of grief, every moment of defiance exploded into a weave so pure, so uncontrolled, that it stunned even the most jaded Aes Sedai watching. What made this moment unforgettable wasn't just its visual splendor, it was the truth of it. Nynaeve didn't want to be a hero. She didn't want to be Aes Sedai. She wanted to protect, to fix, to save. And in doing so, she showed the full, terrifying power of unshaped potential. Her block was real, but so was her will. And in that moment, Nynaeve was not a healer. She was a god. 8. Rand breaks the world and himself. Rand al'Thor's transformation from a sheepish farmer to a vessel of cosmic fate was always going to be a slow spiral. But when he finally unleashed his full strength at the eye of the world, it wasn't triumphant, it was terrifying. This was no chosen one discovering his power. This was a man cracking beneath it. As Rand channeled Saidin, we watched the duality of his soul fracture. Light and madness twined like a serpent. Trees withered. Mountains shook. Reality twisted around him. He didn't just use the one power. He drowned in it. This moment wasn't about victory. It was about cost. Rand's face was stricken not with glory, but with fear, because he realized what he was capable of, and what it would take to win. The show chose not to glorify him. It chose to warn us. That power, untempered by understanding, can raise the world, even when wielded with good intent. And from that point on, Rand wasn't a hero. He was a ticking bomb. 7. Logain's Crown of Madness. Few performances in the series capture the nuance of channeling's curse better than Alvaro Mort's portrayal of Logain Ablar. When we first meet him, he's chained, yet regal. Silenced, yet smiling. A false dragon, yes, but one whose charisma makes you want to believe him. But it's the scene of his unshackling, when the Aes Sedai finally realize they've underestimated him, that defines Logain's legacy. The visual of him weaving the power like a symphony, laughing, seeing voices swirl around him in glowing madness, it's mesmerizing. There's pain in his eyes, and clarity, and complete delusion. Logain's moment was a tragic mirror of Rand's, Where Rand feared the madness, Logain embraced it, and in doing so, he became both prophet and warning. The series gave us a haunting look into what it means to be touched by greatness and doomed by it. 6. Iguain and Chains, but unbroken. Iguain's arc across 3 seasons simmered slowly. She was brave, but often overshadowed, until the scene in Season 3 where she, captured and collared by the Shan-Chan, stood before Rena, brutalized, diminished, broken in body but not in spirit. It was a masterclass in restraint and resistance. Iguain didn't need an army to defy tyranny. She needed her silence, her refusal, her dignity. Even as Rena tried to control her with pain, even as the domain caller tore her will apart, Iguain held something back. A fire, a refusal to surrender her identity. And when that fire ignited, when she refused to be used and turned the caller's power back on her captor, it wasn't just revenge. It was justice. And it was personal. In that moment, Iguain stopped being a student. She became a woman worthy of the Amerlin seat. Not someday. Now. 5. The Arches Test. Nynaeve's heartbreak. When Nynaeve entered the Arches, it was a test, but when she returned, it was a scar. This was no simple trial. It was psychological warfare. The One Power forced her to live a life that felt real: love, peace, family, loss. And then, it ripped it away. What followed was a breakdown on screen unlike anything else in the show. Nynaeve emerged, soaked, shaking, shattered. She wasn't just hurt, she was stripped. The woman who had held herself together through war, rage, and loss finally found something she wanted, and then had to leave it behind. This moment was proof that the Wheel of Time wasn't afraid of emotion. It wasn't afraid to show strength in collapse. And Zoe Robbins delivered one of the most haunting, human moments in modern fantasy with her silent scream. 4. Lan's farewell to Moiraine. For 2 seasons, Lan and Moiraine shared a bond deeper than duty, older than romance. It was built on silence, steel, and sacrifice. But in Season 2, when Moiraine is cut off from the One Power and begins to push him away, we see that bond begin to strain and then break. Or at least, that's what it looks like on the surface. The farewell that followed wasn't explosive. It wasn't theatrical. It was devastating in its quiet. Lan's face, hardened by years of war, wasn't angry. It was lost. Moiraine, who never wavered, looked like a woman drowning in decisions she didn't know how to unmake. And in that painful final exchange, viewers saw something rare in epic fantasy. A relationship grounded in mutual respect, severed not by betrayal, but by necessity. Their parting was more than emotional. It was symbolic. It echoed the cost of isolation, the weight of leadership, and the loneliness of those who walk in shadow to keep others safe. That goodbye stayed with us not because of what was said, but because of what was left unsaid. 3. Ishamels' conversations with Rand. One of the show's boldest creative strokes was how it humanized Ishamel, the first among the Forsaken. In every scene between Ishamel and Rand, the show stopped feeling like fantasy and started feeling like myth. These weren't just enemies, they were reflections. Light and shadow debating the purpose of pain, the burden of choice, the futility of freedom. Their most pivotal conversation, when Ishamel shows Rand a perfect life, where he never had to suffer, where his parents lived, where Iguain loved him without fear, was the kind of psychological battle rarely seen on screen. There were no swords, no magic, just temptation. And it worked. For a moment, Rand almost believed it. This wasn't just villain monologue, it was philosophy. Ishamel wasn't wrong. He was half right. And that's what made it terrifying. It challenged viewers not with what evil is, but what it offers, and what we might trade for peace. 2. The White Tower Civil War begins. In Season 3, tensions within the White Tower reached a breaking point. Liandrin's betrayal, Eleda's rise, and the growing unrest among the Ajahs weren't just background politics. They were the spark of a civil war that book fans knew was coming. And the show didn't shy away from it. What made these tower scenes so electrifying wasn't just the scheming. It was the fear. The Ajahs were splitting. The trust between sisters was dying. And beneath it all was a question that had haunted the tower for centuries. Who watches the watchers? When Iguain began to stand taller, when Suyan Sanche's calm cracked, when Leandrin's mask slipped, it all signaled that the tower was no longer a sanctuary. It was a powder keg. The fallout, had the show continued, would have been glorious. But even what we got, those early glimpses of fracture, were unforgettable. 1. The Shan-Chan invasion and their terrifying order. Nothing redefined the threat of the shadow and human cruelty, like the arrival of the Shan-Chan. When they descended on the city in a cascade of armor, death, and domination, everything changed. The show's tone, until then high fantasy with hints of horror, tipped fully into dystopia. The Shan-Chan weren't monsters. They were order. Cold, beautiful, ruthless order. They didn't just kill, they collared. They didn't just conquer, they reprogrammed. Watching them strip channelers of identity, using the power through enslaved women, brought a level of moral complexity that made viewers physically uncomfortable. And that was the point. The Shan-Chan forced us to ask, what is more terrifying? Chaos or control? And in the eyes of Iguain, in the brutal efficiency of Rena, in the silence that followed every command, we saw a new kind of evil. Not one that cackled, but one that believed it was right. That scene didn't just set a new bar for threat. It reshaped the entire conversation about freedom in the Wheel of Time world. It was, without doubt, the most haunting and brilliant moment the series ever delivered. Final thoughts. The Wheel of Time may not have finished its tale, but in the space of 3 seasons it gave us moments that will endure, scenes of fire, sorrow, revelation, and resilience. These weren't just highlights. They were windows into a story that could have stood shoulder to shoulder with the giants of fantasy television. Each moment carried weight. Each pause, each choice, each unraveling of prophecy was a thread in a tapestry that deserved to be completed. Though the pattern was cut short on screen, it still spins in the hearts of fans. And perhaps one day, these moments will be remembered not as the end, but as the beginning of a return. Because the greatest stories don't die, they wait.